Today I'm going to talk about a text adventure game called O The Wisp. I believe this program originated on the Apple II computer, and I also found ports for the Commodore PET, Commodore 64, and the TI-99 4A. I'll be talking about all these ports and how they differ from the original. But let's start with the Apple II. This program was created by Mark Capella and was published in Nibble magazine in the last issue of 1980. This was a type-in program, and the way Nibble always presented these was to encourage you to learn how the program works so you can make your own modifications or create a similar program of your own. I actually never owned this issue because my family didn't start subscribing to Nibble until about 1983. However, in the back of each magazine you could order a floppy disk from a back issue, and they would also include a photocopy of the associated text from the magazine. Knowing that I enjoyed adventure-type games, my dad ordered me a copy of O The Wisp, and it arrived on this blue floppy disk along with some documentation. This is a text adventure, also known as interactive fiction. Similar to the Infocom games, you can type in cardinal directions to move, and use verbs such as move, get, throw, drop, etc., along with an object. It is quite a lengthy program for a type-in magazine. In the game, you decide to go on one last adventure before marrying your fiancée named Brunhilde. You quickly get lost in a forest and eventually encounter a blue will-o'-the-wisp. This creature guides you to the caves and then locks you in. In the caves, you have to find your way to a castle whose lone inhabitant is the magician Ralph. He agrees to help you get home if you first go on a quest to steal the witch's broom, which was once his magician's staff before the witch stole it. He tells you to find a green will-o'-the-wisp and travel in the opposite direction that it beckons you in order to get to the witch's land. So Ralph teleports you back to the caves, and then you have to do what he said. Once you get to the witch's land, you have to find your way through a number of twisting passages in which you would eventually find a blacksmith shop. In this location, you find Prudence the witch, and you have to kill her in the same way you would if she lived in the land of Oz. Then you can get her broom, return to the castle, and give it to the magician Ralph, who then whisks you away to your beloved Brunhilde. Years ago, I used the Windows program Trizbort to create maps for this program. I'll have a link for these maps in the description. I have maps for the forest, the caves, the castle, and the witch's land. Some of the Commodore ports also originated as type-in programs. One listing was in a magazine called Commodore Computing International in their March 1983 issue. Another listing was in the book CBM64 Programs Volume 1, first published in 1984 by the company Duckworth. Let's start with the Commodore PET port. The text and the locations are the same as the Apple II version. One difference is that this version lists the obvious exits with a listing of the available directions, which can be north, south, east, west, or even diagonal directions. The Apple II version doesn't do this, so this is extremely helpful. One problem with this version is that the green will-o'-the-wisp is missing from the caves. This green wisp is supposed to lead you and give you hints on how to get past the maze. Therefore, it is very difficult to find your way to the witch's land without a lot of trial and error and creating a map. Other than that, the program is the same. Next up is a Commodore 64 version with the text on the familiar blue background. This is the same as the PET version, including the obvious exits and the missing green will-o'-the-wisp. This leads me to believe that the code may be exactly the same as the Commodore PET code. Another Commodore 64 version is from the book I mentioned before that was published by Duckworth. It has the text on top of a yellow background. Depending on what you've downloaded from the internet, sometimes you'll see the author's name listed instead as DJ Veldman, but this is probably just the name of a person that typed it in, saved it, and distributed it. This version also shows the obvious exits and is missing the green will-o'-the-wisp. The major difference compared to all the other versions is that the Magician Ralph transports you past the caves and directly into the witch's land. This saves a lot of time in that you don't have to spend time in that maze-like part of the caves that is missing the green will-o'-the-wisp. I'm guessing whoever typed this in found that portion of the game too difficult and just wanted to bypass it. The last version I found for the Commodore 64 has a black background with green text and uses lowercase letters. It does not mention the author's name. It has an extra page of helpful hints that explains vocabulary and saving options. It is missing the obvious exits that the other Commodore versions have, but the green will-o'-the-wisp is back in the game. This is comparable to the Apple II version. I really like how this one is formatted. It looks nice compared to the others. There are two ports for the Texas Instruments TI-99 4A computer. I saw one of them mentioned in this booklet called the Adventure Reference Guide by Mickey Schmidt. So in this first port, I've listed some of the code so you can see some information about this version. This was translated from the Apple II version by a person named Barry Boland in February of 1985. If you look at the loading screen, there is a lot of color and movement. The title screen mentions both Mark Capella and translator Barry Boland. During the game, at the top of the screen, it provides the number of moves you have taken. Also, instead of showing the obvious exits, it just shows the last move that you made. The text does not scroll as with the other versions. Instead, the screen clears after each move. This version also includes the green will-o'-the-wisp. Mr. Boland also added some minor extras such as a note that you can find and pick up, but if you try to read it, it appears back on the ground. So some minor changes he's put in there. The second TI-99 port is a complete reworking of the original program. It was coded by Felix Dasky, and the introduction includes music. The descriptions and room locations are pretty much the same. One difference is that your fiancée is no longer named Brunhilde, but instead she is named Juliana. The program now lists the obvious exits in its own little window in the upper right-hand corner. Also, there are screens with graphics included in the upper left. Sometimes you have to rely on the picture for a hint rather than the text. For example, in your farmhouse, you have to notice in the picture that there's a bucket. And if you look in the bucket, you can find and take a lantern. You cannot solve this game without a lantern because you will die in the caves without it. You also need to find matches to light the lantern. These items are not in the original program at all. In another example, you may find a dirty rock or wall and you have to use cleaning solution to reveal a hint. The background color changes depending on which section of the game you are in. The forest is blue, the caves are orange, and as you enter the castle, it eventually changes to green. By the way, the green will-o'-the-wisp is in this version. At the end of the program, you are given a score based on the number of moves, and are given a secret word to mention when you call up the author to report your success. I did not call the number provided because I'm sure that person doesn't live there anymore, but I did find Felix on the internet. He owns a computer services business. I reached out to him via email. He was a friendly guy. He responded that he didn't recall programming any games on his TI-99 computer, but he did continue his interest with computers with various models of the Amiga, and then he moved on to PCs after that. In any case, both of the TI-99 ports are interesting to say the least. In the comments, I have links to all the ports that I've talked about so far. When researching for this video, I also read that there may have been a port for the TRS-80 computer. However, I was never able to find one. Let me know in the comments if you have any more information about this possible port. So, if you are into text adventures, you should give Will O The Wisp a try. If you found this video interesting, feel free to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.